Curator's Preface, Musée du Temps de Besançon, Accession MSKEL 1789. The following pages reproduce the private diary of Hans Keller, revered Swiss horologer, spanning February-April 1789. The vellum book was recovered from a sealed compartment within the ruins of the Zitlod Tower during renovations of 1894. Although some edges show soot damage, the ink remains legible. Modern orthography has been adopted for readability. Emphases and punctuation reflect Keller's own hand. The narrow streets of Bern were still shaking off winter when I first noticed the silence. Not the ordinary hush that descends after a snowfall, but an emptiness so complete, the clocks themselves seemed to cower. Every turret bell, every parlor regulator, every pocket watch held an almost imperceptible hesitation at the top of the hour, as though the city were refusing to breathe. I told myself it was imagination, yet when one earns his living coaxing seconds through brass and steel, one develops an ear for tremors in the invisible fabric we call time. My workshop, wedged between the sandstone buttresses of the Nidec Bridge, was a sanctuary of ticking hearts. 37 clocks lined the walls, some out of repair, some awaiting sale, all whispering their individual rhythms into the rafters. On the morning of February the 10th, their harmony faltered. A ripple no more than the flutter of a moth's wing passed through the lot. Pendulums lost amplitude, escapements hiccuped, mainsprings sighed against their barrels, yet none actually stopped. What I felt was subtler, a heartbeat skipped. One moment existed, the next gone, as if snipped from the ribbon of duration and tossed away. I tested barometers, examined humidity, even pinched my arm to be sure sleep had not perched on my shoulders. Everything was ordinary, everything except the sudden certainty that somewhere in the marrow of the hours a tooth had broken off the great gear wheel of the world. Herr Matthias Vogel, my journeyman, arrived with arms full of walnut cases, cheeks pink from the river wind. He noticed my frown at once. "Master Keller, the pallet stones again?" "I can stone them by noon." I waved him off, unwilling to speak the dread aloud. Instead, I pointed at the half-assembled marine chronometer upon my bench, a polished brass throat, bimetal balance, twin barrel train in the English fashion. It was to be my gift, no, my challenge to the forthcoming International Horological Exhibition in Geneva. Rumor whispered that the French were bringing a new detent escapement capable of holding 1 second's error per month. I aimed to have that, but the crown jewel of my device was no escapement at all. It was an innovation born of insomnia and an afternoon spent watching swifts dive along the Ari River. I had discovered that a balance spring, when coupled to a weighted cam of specific geometry, could be made to skip precisely 60 strokes in a controlled pulse and intentional absence. Engage the cam and the chronometer would forge ahead, erasing exactly 1 hour from its display while the rest of the gear train hummed untroubled. Disengage, and it returned to perfect isochronism as though nothing unusual had transpired. In effect, the instrument could make 60 minutes simply vanish. Theoretical value, admirals would scoff. Merchants demanded accuracy, not disappearance. Yet something deeper stirred my ambition. The possibility that time was not a river, but a tapestry into which a skilled hand might snip threads and embroider new patterns. I named the mechanism Verlerini stunned, lost hour. Vogel polished the brass bezel, unaware of how close he stood to the lip of a mystery. "Will the society permit such, how did you call it, chronal displacement?" he asked when I finally explained. "They will scoff," I admitted, "until I demonstrated upon their own pocket watches." The invitation arrived 2 days later, embossed with the seal of the Swiss Guild of Horologers, a special assembly on the vernal equinox, to discuss advances in the measurement and manipulation of time. Manipulation, precisely the word I had scribbled at midnight across my diagrams. Fate approves, I thought. Night after night I ran trials. Engage the cam. The escapement swallowed an hour in a single mechanical sigh. Disengage, flawless beat. Rates resumed, average deviation less than half a second per day. Yet each test left me uneasy, as if some moral boundary blurred beneath the polished brass. The lost hour had to go somewhere. Energy cannot vanish. Was time so different? My anxiety intensified when petty oddities began haunting the workshop. A customer's watch returned for cleaning, mainspring fully wound. Antique silver dial, yet the date ring insisted it was yesterday. Vogel misplaced a fusee cone, found it inside a locked cabinet across the room. The grandfather clock in the vestibule reported midnight at 11, chimed once, then resumed the correct sequence. These were the sorts of gremlins blamed on apprentices and drafts, yet the pattern felt like an echo and hour-shaped, echo reverberating through gears and people alike. I resolved to test the device on myself. Foolishness, perhaps, but a scientist must chase consequences to their lair. At exactly 1 in the morning on the 18th of March, I wound my personal pocket chronometer, engaged the cam, and sat by a candle. The flame burned steady. The second hand marched. Then, in a breath, the minute hand leapt from the 12th to 12:1 full circuit, executed in silence. My heart kicked, but the room remained unchanged. Outside, the Zittglogg bell struck once, an unscheduled knell-braiding midnight end. Dawn in a single note. I glanced at my wall regulators, all registered 2 o'clock sharp, as if the leap had been universal. Vogel, sleeping in the loft, muttered something about missing laundry. I wrote a terse line in the diary, 1 hour extracted. No physiological discomfort, but uncertainty lingers. Where did it go? Morning uncovered stranger fallout. The baker across Marktgasse swore his sourdough proofed in half the expected time. The City Post announced delays due to premature dawn, a phrase that tied my stomach in knots. Had my device shaved 60 minutes off more than a dial? The exhibition drew nearer. I could not abandon the experiment. Yet the idea of unleashing it on a hall of politicos and scientists filled me with dread. On the 21st, sunrise bled, rose over the Alps, and I packed the chronometer into a velvet-lined chest. Vogel accompanied me to the carriage yard. On the road to Geneva, we stopped at a wayside inn. I set the chronometer on the bedside table. It ticked a lullaby. I dreamed of gears meshing into infinity, but at the hub a single missing tooth sparked like lightning. When I woke, my beard was damp with sweat, and the chronometer dial read 7:30. My pocket watch read 6:30. The innkeeper's mantel clock read 8:30. Vogel snored on. I tested again, engaged the cam at noon, dislodged the hour, then examined the world. Nothing immediate. Yet a farmer outside cursed that his prized rooster crowed well before dawn, throwing hens off lay. A young couple complained the stagecoach from Lausanne arrived before it had departed. These were anecdotes, not data, but they aligned into a secret constellation pointing back to my workbench. Geneva's exhibition hall glittered with brass, glass, and pride. French Marine officers boasted of their detent escapement, English gentlemen flaunted jeweled train pivots. Germans unveiled barrel-driven recording chronographs. I took the podium in a hush thick with rival ambition. The guild president introduced me as the Swiss wizard of the second. I wished he had not. I opened the chest. Gasps met the chronometer's polished case. I demonstrated its accuracy in typical mode. Observers murmured approval. Then I flicked the tiny engraved lever. To the naked eye, nothing changed. The hands continued their stately circuit. Quiet grew tense. After the 60th second, the minute hand should have clicked forward, yet it hesitated, then resumed as though 2 minutes had elapsed. I announced, voice barely steady, that precisely 1 hour had just been extracted from the device's tally. Some laughed. Diplomats conferred. A French lieutenant demanded evidence beyond clockmaker stagecraft. I invited him to compare his naval chronometer. Side by side, they were identical, matching seconds, minutes, hours, until my dial suddenly leapt. Ahead, aligning once more, the room exhaled. The lieutenant paled. His instrument now lagged by exactly 60 minutes. Whispers cascaded. Someone shouted witchcraft. Another insisted on mechanical fraud. A British observer, perhaps half joking, begged to buy the lever as weapon against Napoleon's fleet. I had not foreseen such chaos. Guild officials huddled, then ordered the device impounded pending investigation. I surrendered it, reluctantly, yet breathed relief. The genie was back in brass dot, or so I hoped. At midnight, the chronometer vanished from the locked strongbox. In the hall security office, guards swore no one entered. The velvet lining lay intact, but the instrument was gone. I was awoken by pounding fists and accused of theft. My protest was drowned by rumor. Keller had staged disappearance to avoid scrutiny. Keller had sold the secret to Prussian agents. Keller had rewound the city's cathedral clock by black magic. Police retained my passport, confined me to a modest apartment overlooking the rain-pending tribunal. Vogel found lodgings nearby and smuggled me paper and ink. I wrote through the night, charting every test, every anomaly, desperate to pinpoint a flaw. One fact screamed louder than ink. Each activation of the device corresponded with a widening circle of time slippage incidents. Baker's dough, Rooster's dawn, stagecoach's schedule. The leaps were not confined to brass, they rippled outward, redistributing minutes across the canton like misprinted currency. Perhaps time, once removed, must settle elsewhere. I slept fitfully, dreaming of pendulums swinging without load, cities breathing out of step, people losing birthdays in their sleep. The chronometer's absence haunted me. Without it, I could neither prove innocence nor repair damage. 3 mornings later, news arrived like a chill breeze. Bern's Zitglon Tower struck noon at 10, then chimed 13 times. Citizens panicked. Market stalls emptied. In my workshop, every clock, according to Vogel, who had rushed home, stood hopelessly advanced by precisely 1 hour. Somewhere my device had found new hands, and they were tearing seams wider than my guilt could measure. That evening, beneath a rain-slick bridge in Geneva, I felt the strange hesitation against seconds faltering, as though stumbling over a missing stair. A beggar's candle winked out without consuming its wick. A passing coach's horses shied, nostrils flaring at air gone suddenly cold. I reached for my pocket watch. The minute hand darted forward, then froze, as if deciding whether to obey. The missing hour was on the move. I penned the last line before dawn. The lost hour is no longer an absence, but a creature breathing, hungry. If I do not hunt it, it will hunt us all. The candle died. Dawn bells rang out of sync, some late, others early, until the city sounded like a battlefield of clashing minutes. I rose, gathered my coat, and stepped into a morning that felt one heartbeat short of real. The streets of Geneva throbbed with minutes that refused to stand in queue. Carriage wheels rattled at mismatched tempos. Church clocks posted on opposite corners of the same square disagreed by 61 minutes, then 62, as though the gap itself were breeding. Merchants argued whether midday had passed twice or not yet at all. In the news sheets, the phenomenon earned a name, La Fugue de l'Heure, the hour's escape, but no writer guessed its origin. Only I carried that shame, heavy as a mainspring. In a ruined barrel dot with my passport impounded, pursuit demanded discretion. I enlisted Vogel, whose loyalty outweighed his good sense, and Dr. Elise Brochant, a mathematician from the Conservatoire, whose lecture on non-integer dimensions of temporal flow I had once attended in awe. She listened while I laid out the story, the skipping cam, the missing hour, the widening ripples. Instead of laughing, she traced the lever's geometry in the air, lips moving through silent calculus, and said, "If your mechanism extracts temporal quanta, the deficit must settle where tension is lowest places of irregular synchronization. Clocks themselves become conduits. We began our hunt by following misfires. A hotel whose staff claimed dawn service occurred at 5, though the sky remained star-jammed. A watchmaker whose regulator lunged forward 60 minutes every time he wound it. Each site, we discovered, possessed something in common. A secondary mechanism music box, metronome, even a cuckoo whose escapement teeth were freshly filed, not by human hand but by frictionless abrasion, as if ghost gears had mached with real ones, boring grooves into brass until the hour could anchor there. Wherever the chronometer traveled, it seems to groomed servants, marking out relays ready to shoulder its stolen load. On the 5th night of our search, we stood outside the Paula Longchamp concert hall, drizzle stippling Elisa's spectacles. Inside, the city's Philharmonic rehearsed Haydn's Clock Symphony. At the first tutti, the building's lantern clocks leapt forward an hour in a single gulp, and 2 sopranos fainted. The conductor, shaken, dismissed orchestra. We slipped backstage and found on a velvet chair a gilt program with a smudge of fresh oil whose scent matched the thin clockmaker's grease. I mix in Bern. Our thief had passed within the hour figuratively and literally. Inspector Jaubert, head of city gendarmes, summoned me next morning. His ash-gray uniform smelled of sleeplessness. Monsieur Keller, eyewitnesses place a gentleman of your stature near every chronal incident. Convince me you are not engineer of this calamity. I answered with equal exhaustion. The device is mine, yes, but my intent is recapture, not release. Help me and I shut the wound. Jaubert's knuckles whitened on his cane. Geneva opens its arms to scholars, not sorcerers. You have 48 hours before I clap irons on both wrists and thoughts. He slid a dossier across the desk. Sightings of a tall stranger in an Inverness cape, gloved hands, moving from clock tower to clock tower. One note chilled me. The man carried a brass cylinder with scrimshaw of a fractured hourglass. The decorative engraving on Verlerini Stun's case. Back in our borrowed apartment, Elise spread city maps marking each anomaly. A spiral emerged counterclockwise centered. Not on the exhibition hall but 50 kilometers north, where Lake Geneva's waters funnel into the rain gorge. A lever without fulcrum is useless, she mused. Your thief drives stolen minutes toward a point of resonance. Somewhere upriver, he will attempt a larger extraction. I understood at once. The only clockwork powerful enough to steer a river of seconds was the Grimselsee hydrochronometric array, an experimental water-powered astronomical clock I had. Toured a year prior, twin granite towers, gear trains tall as houses, calibrated to solar noon by valves that measured water pressure and glacier melt. Its designer, Herr Dietrich Weiss, my former instructor, had always called time a tide rather than a line. If someone meant to drain a full hour from the world, Grimselsee offered both leverage and symbolic poetry. Vogel bribed a ferryman to smuggle us past gendarme checkpoints. We reached the gorge under mist-masked moon. The array loomed above cataracts, shafts and wheels silhouetted against starlight. And there, in the operator's gallery, lantern glow pulsed like a heartbeat. We ascended iron stairs slick with spray, each clang echoing through stone dot inside. Dietrich Weiss himself stood at the master console, one hand on the throttle controlling water torque, the other caressing my chronometer like a fondled relic. He looked older but eyes burnt manic ochre. Hans, he greeted, voice roughened by alpine cold. I teach you to measure hours and you build a knife to cut them. Beautiful. My mouth dried. Return the device. Every use unthreads reality. He flicked the lever. Turbines groaned. Pressure gauges trembled. Reality, mere consensus. The French calibrate noon to Paris, the British to Greenwich. I will grant Europe a new meridian time independent of nations. He gestured across towers. Tonight Glacier's pulse will devour not 1 but 13 hours. Tomorrow the world awakens in a dawn it has not earned and learns humility. Elise stepped forward. A leap that size destabilizes causality. Seasons depend on fractional days, tides on lunar moments. You will drown harvests, birth storms. Weiss smiled. Sacrifice, humanity refined by temporal scarcity. You of all scholars should grasp beauty of scarcity. His thumb depressed the cam. Somewhere in the bowels of machinery, an escapement shrieked, then fell silent. A tremor rippled through the array. Every indicator needle jittered to red. Outside, the waterfall appeared to slow threads of liquid silver lagging behind gravity. Weaving impossible curtains, I lunged. Weiss sidestepped, surprisingly swift, cuffing me with brass-bound fist. Pain burst behind eyes. Vogel tackled him. The chronometer skittered across metal grating, struck rail, landed on catwalk below. Elise and I scrambled after it. Far beneath, floodgates widened. Water roared. Tempo irregular. Surging, stalling, surging, a stutter echo of the missing hour. Weiss regained footing, seized a lever, and yanked. Alarm whistles howled. Gear clutch engaged. Colossal Rocher drums began winding cables that once controlled seasonal calendar dials. Now each drum served as flywheel, hoarding kinetic promise. The longer they spun, the more catastrophic the subsequent. Cut. Elise shouted over din. We can't merely stop the machine, we must bleed the potential. If we sever power abruptly, hours already displaced will have nowhere to settle. I stared at the chronometer cradled in my trembling hand. The skipcam remained armed, ready to swallow another hour. A heretical idea flickered. If extraction created tension, perhaps reversal reinsertion would release it. Weiss's voice thundered from gallery. Too late, Hans. Dawn rushes to greet us. He pulled a lanyard. Giant shutters in the roof opened, revealing constellations swirling odd, as if sky itself spun on faulty bearing. I set to work. The cam possessed a barely used detent, a hairline spring meant to reset skip mechanism for maintenance. If depressed while mainspring under full wind, the device would disgorge stored seconds back through balance in a flood, sloppy but complete. A reckless maneuver. Backlash could strip teeth, even explode jewels, but if timed as flywheels reached peak, yes, we might pour the hoarded hour back into machinery, collapsing his vast deficit. Elise calculated torque on scrap parchment. Vogel clung to railing, knuckles bone white, awaiting my nod. I breathed a silent apology to craft, to time, to my childhood self polishing his first Verge watch, then braced the chronometer against. Grating, screwdriver poised on detent. One truth of horology: release beats capture. The moment tension finds path to earth, it takes it. At my shout, Vogel hurled a wedge between governor arms, forcing flywheels momentarily free. Gauges spiked. I depressed the detent. A shriek ripped through brass, second hand blurred backwards. Mainspring unwound in single monstrous sigh. The array shuddered, shutters slammed, sky's swirl halted. Water roared with renewed gravity. Cataract surge found its rhythm. Somewhere a world's worth of scattered seconds rushed home like pigeons to roost, slamming into empty minutes with audible thunks across valley. Bells rang out of schedule. Rifle shot echoes of time zones snapping into alignment. Weiss staggered, clutching his ears as if enduring tinnitus. You dumped perfection into chaos, he spat. No, Elise replied. We restored the ledger you tried to forge. Joubert's gendarmes, guided by tremor, burst in at dawn. Weiss surrendered, laughing with brittle triumph, but his eyes, once sun-eaten, now flickered dim, as though internal clockwork missed a vital gear. He muttered of hour knives and tides of vacancy, while police bound his wrists. In Geneva, the bells tolled unanimous noon for the first time in weeks. Traders cheered, unaware why. Yet remnants of the fugue lingered. Bakers complained dough now rose sluggish. Train porters found pocket chronographs forever 5 seconds late. Minor scars, Elise assured, that would fade as pendulums re-entrain. Tribunal cleared my name, but banned public exhibition of Verlorenes stunned. The chronometer, battered yet intact, was placed under double lock in the vault of the Musée du Temps. I signed the deed smiling. In secret, I had removed the skip cam and hammered it into scrap, melted into ballast lead for a fisherman's net. Let the hour lost remain drowned at the bottom of Lake Geneva, where only perch and silent catfish trace its spiral trajectory. Elise returned to her lectures, adding a discreet appendix to her syllabus on entropy of temporal displacement. Vogel resumed work in Bern, though every month he sends a postcard precisely 60 minutes before its postmark. His private joke, proof the hour still wanders. As for me, I have sworn to mend rather than meddle. Yet some nights, when the Zitlog chimes, I feel a phantom hesitation, like a tooth missing from the great gear wheel of the world. I remember how easily the line between measurement and manipulation can blur. In those moments I open a simple, ordinary pocket watch, no tricks, no skip teeth, and wait for the second hand to kiss the top of the dial. When it does, I offer silent thanks that the tick follows the talk, and no one has yet found the courage or folly to steal that heartbeat again. Mid-April found Bern dressed in tulips and uneasy gossip. The hour's escape had ended, yet clocks still whispered of missing beats. Town criers reported dawn 3 minutes late on alternate days. Milk soured between chime and swallow, and once, the night of a crimson aurora, the Zitlog's great wheel spun backward for a single, shuddering rotation before resuming its lawful course. I had destroyed the skip cam, yet some phantom torsion persisted. Coiled deep in the mainspring of reality, my workshop felt haunted by that phantom. Regulators kept impeccable rate until I looked away. Then and there, they lost or gained the span of a breath. Vogel swore he heard a faint metallic rasp, like a pawl refusing to seat, every time the distortion passed. We nicknamed it the ghost ratchet. Spiritualists knocked at my door offering exorcisms. I sent them packing with the same polite dread I reserved for creditors. Dr. Elise Brochant arrived unannounced on the 10th, cheeks flushed by alpine rail and urgency. She spread fresh seismograph rolls across my bench. Geneva, Paris, Vienna, sub-audible tremors marching in a pattern she called a temporal standing wave, nodes fixed at cities whose public clocks had been most disturbed. Amplitude decayed, true, but each node beat in phase with the next, forming a girdle of quivering seconds around Europe. If left unchecked, the wave would amplify on Midsummer's Day, when solar noon and civil noon parted widest. Cracking the world's chronology like frost in a bell dot, we needed a terminus, one last escapement, to bleed the leftover energy in a foggy, controlled recoil, else the entire continent might someday wake an hour adrift, crops and tides be damned. Elise proposed a daring plan. Construct an inverse of Verlorenes stunned, not a knife to cut an hour, but a loom to weave it back wherever deficit lingered. She dubbed the device stun null. Hour zero, building. Hour zero demanded parts banned by guild edict by metal springs of nickel titanium, twin remontoire escapements that refreshed energy every 2 seconds, a differential planetary cage able to spin both forward and back, allowing the movement to remember and then forget an interval in perfect symmetry. We worked in secrecy, candle wicks burning to ash, brass filings frosting our hair like early snow. Vogel questioned nothing, even when I instructed him to cast the balance ring from the melted lead that once housed the skip cam, reclaiming the enemy's bones as our shield. Bern's guildmasters grew suspicious. Apprentices reported night glows through my shutters. On the eve of Valpurgis, Inspector Jalbert rode in with official writ. Herr Dietrich Weiss had escaped the sanatorium, leaving walls scribbled with logarithmic spirals and the phrase Zeitfrist Mutt time eats courage. Witnesses spied him boarding a mail coach north. Side pockets allegedly bulged with blueprints. At midnight, a telegram arrived from Dr. Vaughan, coastal barometers off by exactly 60 minutes of tidal prediction. Fishermen insisting waves broke against piers an hour before the moon commanded them. The standing wave had breached the sea. Hour zero was only half assembled, but midsummer approached like a fuse. Elise calculated we could intercept the swelling node atop the Jungfrau, highest of Europe's public time signals, where a telegraph-controlled regulator drove railway schedules over half the continent. If we bled the wave there, its harmonics would dissipate harmlessly across empty sky. We packed crates, brass drum, escapement cage, argent steel balance, a rack of tuning forks spanning every low subharmonic, and Elise's new quartz sand chronograph for calibration. The final piece was a vial containing the very first physical chip of time I had ever lost, preserved within a sealed vacuum ampule, distilled from a burst joule at the array. Its presence made the air around it quiver, as though light itself clicked 2 frames ahead. We would re-stitch that freestanding hour back into the loom and demand the universe close its hem. The cog railway ground us up the Lauterbrunnen wall amid avalanches of moonlit snow. By dawn we reached the summit observatory. Its master timekeeper, Frau Ochs, a sober woman of Morsky fingers, escorted us to the regulator room, mahogany cabinets housing a short master clock whose pendulum swung in chilled vacuum. She conceded the pendulum's index mirror lately flashed an extra arc each dusk. A wink no man commands. We asked for 3 hours alone. She crossed herself and obliged. Mountains breathed glaciers outside windows. Inside we built our zero upon a granite plinth anchored to bedrock. Elise tuned the twin escapements until their beat frequencies hugged the standing waves node to within 1 part in 10 billion, a precision that left my veteran hands trembling. Vogel soldered the ampule into the balance rim, sealing it beneath a crystal bezel engraved with a single 0 dot with everything poised. We awaited 12 o'clock solar when the wave's crest must pass like a tide through the regulators. Snow-bright noon flooded the observatory. Pendulum mirrors flashed. Our seismograph quills jittered. Elise nodded, lips white. I depressed the crown. Hour zero engaged with a sound nothing like a click more, a sigh of wind reversed. The balance began to oscillate back and forth at 2 tempos simultaneously, forward ticks interleaved with backward ones. Canceling into a soft middle silence, the ampule cracked. Distilled hour vented bright motes into the cage, each speck a frozen second returning home. Outside, a hush fell over the mountain so deep we heard ice settling a mile down valley. For 10 throbs the standing wave fed itself into the movement, amplitude plummeting on Elise's graph paper. Then a gunshot echoed down the corridor. Weiss burst through the door, coat flapping raven wing, eyes sunken to coal. A cavalry revolver smoked in his fist. Frau Ochs lay crumpled behind him, blood spotting her timekeeper's smock. He advanced. Voice shredded. The loom is mine. I will weave a dawn that never ends. Another shot cracked. Glass shattered around hour zero. Elise dove across gears. Vogel tackled Weiss, hand closing on revolver barrel. The weapon discharged into brass. Cabinets, pendulum glass imploded. In the chaos, I saw hour zero falter. 1 escapement paused, unbalanced by the shattered crystal. Seconds resumed their ordinary forward march, but only forward. Without contrabeat, the movement would trap the remaining wave energy, then rebound cataclysmically. Instinct overrode fear. I wrenched free the regulator's mercury compensated, pendulum 7 feet of precision art, and jammed its rod into hour zero's planetary cage. Bridging forward and backward gears, the machine shrieked, showering sparks. Torque flung me aside. Elise crawled toward me, face ash gray. Behind her, Weiss hurled Vogel off, lunging for the device. Each pace he took dithered as though ground slid 1 frame sideways. He reached into the open cage, fingers grasping the spinning balance. Time tore. The world blinked, mountains leapt a finger's width east. Shadows skewed, my own heartbeat skipped then doubled. Weiss screamed, hand desynchronized. Flesh lagged. Bone, then liquefied into glittering dust. He collapsed. A heap of seconds UNSTITCHE. Hour 0 emitted one final, resolving chord, a bell ringing inside mind, not ear, and stopped. The pendulum receded. Stillness gelled around us. I could taste reality knitting itself, the faint copper tongue of chronology drawing closed. Elise checked her quartz chronograph. Smile broke, weak but victorious. Note amplitude 0. We did it. Yaubert's Alpine Brigade arrived 2 hours late by ordinary reckoning, but precisely on time by a world freed of turbulence. They removed Weiss's echoing remains in a lead casket and escorted us down valley, no charges filed. History itself had exonerated us. In the following weeks, Europe's clock slid back into alignment. The Zickglaube regained its steady beat. Baker's dough rose by recipe. Tides obeyed the moon. Hour 0 rests now beneath the Musée du Temps. Its escapements locked. Its ampoule a hollow bubble. It is kept beside Verlaine stunned, both labeled artifacts of hubris and repair. Some ripples cannot be erased. People born during the hours. Escape celebrate birthdays that never appear on almanacs. A vineyard in Vaux claims its 1789 vintage, ripened twice and tastes of 2 summers. At night, the Bern Observatory occasionally notes a phantom star, blinking 1/60-minute, arc ahead of prediction, as if some distant piece of sky once skipped with us and never went back. I walk the Neidig Bridge each dawn, pocket watch in hand. Its second hand plays no tricks, yet the silence between ticks feels deeper, filled with a wisdom I dare not measure. Time, I have learned, is not a river nor a tapestry. It is a living train of gears, endlessly meshing, grinding, forgiving. None yet allowing all. We may oil its pivots. We may marvel at its wheelwork. But remove one tooth, and the whole contrivance howls. When bells in the distance strike the hour, I bow my head not as master of moments, but as servant grateful. For every honest tick that follows a rightful talk,